For the figure skating community in the United States, February 15th, 1961 is remembered as a deeply tragic day. 18 athletes, plus coaches, referees, judges, and family members making up the United States figure skating team were on their way to compete in the 1961 World Championships in Prague, Czechoslovakia. Connecting through Brussels, they flew on Sabena Flight 548 out of New York. Operated with a then brand new Boeing 707. In fact, the crash of Sabena Flight 548 was the first fatal accident to involve a 707 on a commercial passenger flight. So what went wrong? The mid-20th century was an exciting time for aviation. Coming out of World War II, technology had improved substantially, but still passenger planes mainly consisted of propeller-powered aircraft. Jet technology was becoming a thing, following experimental models in the 1940s. The 1950s saw the first passenger jet planes take flight. The United Kingdom and Russia launched their jet planes, the de Havilland Comet and the Tupolev 104 respectively. In the United States, the same technology was being engineered by Boeing and Douglas. In America, it was Boeing who was the first to launch a passenger jet, the Boeing 707. Though the 707 was not the first passenger jet plane, it's arguably the most influential of its time. Over 1,000 of these planes were built when also accounting for the further developed Boeing 720, and they could also be used to fly further than any other plane of the time. The Belgian airline Sabena was one early customer of the type. On February 14, 1961, the Boeing 707 registered as Oscar Oscar Sierra Juliet Bravo arrived at New York's Idlewild Airport and was to head back across the Atlantic in the evening to Brussels. On board were 61 passengers, 34 of which made up the United States figure skating team heading to Prague. In total, there were 11 crew members, including flight attendants and pilots. Sabena Flight 548 navigated its way out of New York and across the Atlantic Ocean with no reported problems. Although, about 20 minutes out from the destination airport, air traffic controllers in Brussels reported issues with radio communications between them and the aircraft. This was, however, only temporary, and the accident plane continued towards the airport. At the flight controls was 43-year-old Captain Ludovic Marie Anthony Lambrechts. He was sitting in the left seat in the cockpit. In the right-hand seat was his first officer, Jaune. On the 707 during this time, there were a further 2 members of the flight crew. On this occasion, these positions were filled by flight engineer Lucien Edouard and the navigator Jean Quint. The airport itself, Brussels Saventem Airport, at the time operated with 4 runways. The runway that Flight 548 was expecting to use was runway 20, now modern-day runway 19. To emphasize, aside from a minor radio communication problem, there was no other issues reported with the flight. The time was 10 a.m. local time when Flight 548 was on final approach. A smaller aircraft ahead of the 707 had just used the same runway and had not vacated yet when Flight 548 had reached an altitude of 900 feet. A go-around, that is, an intentional missed approach to retry the landing again, was executed. The landing gear was retracted and engine power increased as the pilots then climbed to try the approach again as the runway was not clear of traffic. It was what happened in this go-around attempt that is of interest. The problem with discussing this accident is that details on exactly what happened can be rather vague. The result of the accident was put down to a loss of control due to undetermined factors. It is this key word, undetermined, that is striking. When the American Federal Aviation Administration investigated the incident, they put forward multiple hypotheses. The most plausible of these can be found in relation to a malfunction of the horizontal stabilizer. This seems to be backed up further as another source highlights comments from a former 707 pilot suggesting that the stabilizer malfunction led to this loss of control. So let's dive into a bit more detail. The horizontal stabilizers are those small wings at the back of airplanes. On the 707 and many other planes, they subtly shift in angle to control the pitch of a plane. The two working together simultaneously are essential airplane control surfaces. One part of these stabilizers are the elevators, located on the trailing edge of the stabilizer. These are wired to the aircraft's control wheel and are the parts which deflect up and down when a pilot pushes or pulls the control wheel in the cockpit. The entire stabilizer assembly itself can also be pitched up and down with the help of the trim wheel. This is called a trimmable horizontal stabilizer. This trim wheel is another component found in the cockpit. On the 707 and most passenger aircraft, in fact, it is found as part of the throttle assembly. Pilots can spin it to angle the stabilizers to a desired angle. The purpose of this is to allow a greater level of control to the pilots and can also alleviate pressure off the control wheel. As the pilots of Flight 548 executed their go-around, shortly after they experienced their trim wheel running away to a pitch position of full nose up, a position of 10.5 degrees. This would have made the aircraft hard to control very quickly. The Boeing 707 pitched up, and the pilots immediately knew there was something wrong with their plane. To counter the nose pitching upwards, the pilots needed to push their control wheels forward, but even then, the plane was still very difficult to fly. The pilots then suggested landing on runway 25 to get themselves on the ground as soon as possible. For this, they would have had to have made a large left turn to line up with this runway. As the pilots pushed forward on the control wheel, they also tried banking the aircraft to force the plane's nose to go down. They would try this multiple times. In a situation where a plane uncontrollably pitches its nose up, a great amount of airspeed can be lost, putting a plane in a stall scenario where there is not enough speed for the wings to generate lift. Without a lot of altitude, collision with the ground is more likely. Sabena Flight 548 would make a total of 3 360-degree turns in the pilot's efforts to regain control. There was a moment when the pilots had a maximum bank angle of 90 degrees. The plane's wings orientated in a vertical position. As the pilots could control the plane's roll, this was done on purpose to try and lower the nose. They then leveled the wings. In doing so, as supposedly the stabilizer malfunction had meant that the plane now had a tendency to violently pitch up. Once the wings were leveled, the plane uncontrollably again pitched up. Moments later, this transitioned into a nosedive. The pilots had lost control of their plane, which crashed shortly thereafter. Sabena Flight 548 came down in a marshy farmland near the town of Kampenhout. The Boeing 707 exploded when it hit the ground, killing all 72 occupants in the plane. This meant that the crash had killed the entire US figure skating team in the disaster. A young farmer by the name of Theo de Layette was killed while he was at work on this farmland. Another farmer, Marcel Loers, was also injured in the crash when a piece of debris struck his leg, which later needed to be amputated. Sabena Flight 548 became the deadliest aviation disaster to ever occur in Belgium, and still holds that title to this day. It was also the first major crash involving the Boeing 707. The Belgian government ordered an inquiry into the disaster. Investigators in Belgium were helped by investigators from the Federal Aviation Administration in the United States. Air crash investigators who looked over the disaster site published a report with close analysis upon the plane's stabilizer assembly. Multiple hypotheses were put forth by investigators, who, when discovering the stabilizer in a jammed position of 10.5 degrees, wanted to know exactly why the stabilizer trim mechanism ran away to its near maximum position of 11 degrees, uncommanded from the pilots. The problem was that investigators could not exactly pinpoint what happened on the 707 during its final moments. This was after countless hours of analysis of the wreckage, interviews with eyewitnesses, and consultations with experts. The crash to this day is labeled as a loss of control due to undetermined reasons. This presented an obvious problem. The 707 was a brand new plane in the early 1960s. By the end of 1961, over 300 of the planes had been delivered to various airlines across the world. A new emergency procedure was temporarily developed. Should 707 pilots find their stabilizer trim wheel to be running away, as it were, pilots were now recommended to pull the relevant circuit breakers to cut the electrical power to the system, mitigating further loss of control. Stabilizer cutout switches were also added onto the plane and retrofitted onto existing models. The same switches would find their way onto the later developed Boeing 727, 737, and 747, which in their early models all had flight decks which were of similar design. Due to the loss of the US figure skating team, the International Skating Union cancelled the World Championships that year out of respect. The 707, despite this accident and numerous others, went on to be one of the most iconic aircraft of the 20th century. The airline Sabena ceased operations in 2001, being replaced with Brussels Airlines, which flies to this day. A small memorial now stands at the crash site of Flight 548. The area itself was transformed into a Belgian suburban town. Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching. We are near the end of the year. 2021 has been a very interesting year for me, and I have never missed a weekend to post for the past 52 weeks, and I plan on finishing that quest with the final video of the year, which will go out on Christmas Day. Until then, I would like to take a moment to thank my patrons over on Patreon for their support. If you would like to have your name featured here or read out at the end of the next video, you can join the Disaster Breakdown Patreon from £3 per month, and the link to that will be in the pinned comment below. So you have until this coming Thursday to get your name featured in the final video of the year. It won't be a special video or anything, it will just be a regular video. All patrons also get early access to all new videos 48 hours before they go out publicly on YouTube. With that said, I would like to give a thank you to the £5 tier patrons: Avery Toyota, Chillhelm, a new joiner, Hunter Heilman, Hector Palmateles, Jennifer Friketic, Joey, John Ambrosia, Ken Zachman, Kenneth Morins, Len, Leon San Jennings, Marie Innes, MG, Michelle, Mom Left Me at Best Buy, MX Koifish, Pac-Man7, Panic Chicken, Pedro Cruz, Pipsqueak, Rebecca Rivers, Rez, Ria Wheatley, Savia Melody, Sleepy, Suso Sue Shoes, TriStar Triforce, and Tristan Kriegsman. If you can't tell, I'm still trying to get over a cold I've had for the past week. And big thanks to the generous £10 tier patrons for their incredible support: Ada Montgomery, Ann Sid, Bod Ghost Isu, Derek Bean, Epsilon, Erin Wilson, Extreme Brooklyn Accent, Karma, Lily K. May, Megan Garrick, Mike Milton, Roger Mayer, SoFP, Steve Cottrell, Thick Coconut, Vapronva, and Where Are My Cheetos? Thank you all so much. And that is it from me for now, and I will see you next week for the final video of the year. Goodbye.